You're watching the New Stack Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more information and articles about at-scale technologies, please visit thenewstack.io. Now enjoy the show.
GitLab is the most comprehensive AI-powered DevSecOps platform for software innovation. GitLab enables organizations to increase developer productivity, improve operational efficiency, reduce security and compliance risk, and accelerate digital transformation.
Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Riggins. I'm the tech culture correspondent at the New Stack, and we're here today at the Open Source Summit in Europe in beautiful Bilbao. And today I'm talking to Fatima from GitLab about allyship. So please, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Fatima Sarah Khalid. I'm a developer evangelist at GitLab, where I work on DevSecOps and AI and community building.
That was a lot of bingo, hashtag bingo for the OSS Summit.
Yeah.
You nailed that. So I guess I like a baseline definition as a journalist. So let's start up. What is allyship?
Allyship is supporting and uplifting people from underrepresented or marginalized backgrounds.
Okay. Why are we talking about it in the context of open source?
Open source communities tend to be historically not very diverse, and there have been a lot of initiatives in order to improve that. I think having these conversations here and giving talks about allyship is one way to help further that conversation.
And I'm really excited because tomorrow you're giving a keynote. Well, by the time tomorrow in the world when we're recording this. Don't know when it will publish. But tomorrow you're giving a keynote about this topic, which as a tech culture journalist, people don't give a crap about allyship, diversity, equity, inclusion this year in our year 2023, which is a real bummer after a couple of good years where it was least performative. So I'm very excited that your keynote is happening. But why should is allyship something done at the individual level, or can organizations be allies? Why should they care now?
I think organizations should always care about allyship. I know that ebbs and flows depending on the climate. I'm really excited about this keynote. I think it's a combination of GitLab sending me, Linux, the foundation inviting me, and I'm very excited to talk about allyship on such a big stage. I think that really signals the importance and value of the topic itself, and inviting someone who looks like me in order to speak on this topic. So for me, it's a really great contribution, and I'm excited for it to inspire people to feel that they too can belong on that stage. It's the keynote stage.
That's super exciting. When I saw that, I was like, that's not very 2023 in the best of ways that it can be. And it's a good opportunity to have you up there and speak to the women that are in the audience.
And one of the things in the keynote that I really want to stress upon is a lot of people get intimidated by the concept of allyship. There's a lot of terminology in diversity and inclusion, and it's really important to me to remind people that it isn't about the big things that you can do, but it is about the little interactions, and there are small changes and ways that you can be an ally in your everyday interactions that can make you a better person and make the community around you more welcoming, and that's really what I want to focus on with that.
So to put it into the lens of the open source, so what would an example of that be, like in a Slack community or wherever you're open, to be honest, likely a Slack community where your open source community exists. How would someone act out as an ally or be an ally in these small ways?
If your open source community resides primarily on Slack or another tool that's online, maybe it's only async communication based on text, it's great to have good moderation practices to make sure that the community dialogue is being monitored. And it's also good to be wary of the time zones in which you're having those meetings to make sure that you're inclusive of the different contributors that you might have across the globe, and they're also able to be a part of that conversation. So maybe you should document those meetings in a handbook like we do at GitLab, or have async conversations so that there's not a designated time to drop in, but people can come and go and be a part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And definitely recognize contributions like creating that documentation or translating that documentation. Having a welcome person in a certain language or culture can help.
Absolutely.
Not just recognizing the technical contributions, which obviously are important too, but I was wrong in thinking this was the OSS Summit for a while, the Open Source Software Summit, but really it's just called the Open Source Summit, which I think helps position it in the world of community and allyship. So what about at a tech event, which tend to be representative of the poor diversity? And when we're talking about poor diversity in open source, they say for women and non-binary anywhere between 4 and 12%. And then, for example, I believe Africa is 17% of the world population, but 2% of open source contributors. There's a lot of demographics, mostly on the binary, but all of them are pretty grim. Part of that's because, well, even this event's in English, and that can be problems, but there are other events, I hope, that are starting to come up in different languages. But how do you make yourself an ally at an event, at a tech event?
There are a lot of things that can go into event planning to make sure that an event is more inclusive. Setting up a quiet space, setting up dedicated luncheons like a women in lunch or a diversity lunch, setting up onboarding systems so that if you're a newcomer to the conference, there's a guide. Maybe there's an individual who can support you throughout the conference. Maybe it's somebody from the same region that you're from in order to bridge that connection. So there are a lot of ways that you can make that experience a lot better. For example, this year we're going to sponsor, GitLab is going to sponsor Grace Hopper conference. I'm really excited to be attending for the first time, and my manager is also attending, so I'm really excited to have an ally with me throughout the conference and get to experience that as well.
That's really great because you don't think about it, but people also, when you don't automatically feel like you have a belonging space, helping run or sponsor an event, also you need that ally to help you.
Often when I look at conference schedules, I'll take a look at what the talks are to see if I am being represented in those talks. And so when I look at a schedule and I see that there is a woman luncheon, or maybe there's a BOF discussing how to bring in more contributors that are diverse or into a project, like those are the signals that I look for to see if this community is open to contributors from all over the world.
Yeah, I thought was very interesting in the schedule this year that it's sprinkled throughout, which is good. That's kind of what you want. You don't want just a diversity panel because usually those are poorly attended, but there's a lot of individual voices that are taught, like inclusion from an Asian person's perspective, things like that, which I thought was neat and I've not seen at a lot of tech events, so I'm happy and welcome, and please do more at Linux Foundation and any other tech industry. Keep up momentum. This is really positive. These are positive changes we want to see. Now let's talk more about GitLab and their allyship. So for people that don't know, what is GitLab and how does allyship work in this remote first company, which is already part of inclusion, but yeah.
GitLab strongly believes in committing to allyship. In fact, we believe that everyone can contribute and everyone should contribute, and it's baked into the values system at the company. We have programs like the Ally Lab, which is a buddy system where if one person is learning to experience new cultures, and they'll get paired up with somebody from another part of the world and they'll learn together. So it's a great way to build connection in a remote company, but also allow people to learn more and educate themselves about experiences.
Oh, that's great because it can be overwhelming onboarding. And in general, at organizations in tech, you may be the only one that meets some sort of demographic measure. So it's really important onboarding. Or I heard yesterday at that women's lunch we spoke about a couple of the young women at our table. This was their first event. So they had an actual breakfast on day one. That was for first, and they were partnering up, which I think is a way to feel safer at an event as well, to just make a new friend.
One of the things I really loved when I was interviewing for GitLab is that you can request to speak to somebody from the TMRG, the employee resource group that you identify with. And so to better understand the culture at the company, before I joined, I asked to speak with someone from the women's TMRG. And that's a really great way because it's not actually an interview, but it's an opportunity to learn about the culture and the way that people interact within the company. So that's another way that organizations can help build better programs, is allow people to understand and have their spaces where they belong.
And to access people, don't close off, because there are certain companies that we've saw that in the last year banned employee resource groups.
I'm very lucky to work at an organization with a number of resource groups. We have a women's TMRG, which in its own way is a great space to share and connect, especially when something is happening in the world. We'll get together and support each other. We have an Asian TMRG, so I get to celebrate my holidays with the people that identify the way that I do. We have a Global Voices TMRG, and in that one, I'm actually very much a listener because I'm based in the US. So from the Global Voices TMRG, I can learn a lot about the experiences of our users and customers and employees that live in different places around the world. So GitLab really gives me the opportunity to learn from other people as well, but also find those spaces where I feel like I'm really valued and heard.
And that's so important with the Global South because they're probably the group in the world that could most benefit from open source, but are often closed off from accessing it. So it's super important and that they are also doing it for their team.
Yeah, something that really happened this morning during Abu Bakr and I were presenting on the importance of non-code contributions, and he was talking about his experience organizing community in Nigeria, and there was someone in the audience with a similar experience, and the way they connected after the conversation, I was like, this is what conferences are for, to bridge those connections among community members so that they can connect and learn from each other's communities.
That's so important, and that's exciting. And again, that comes from intentionally having a schedule that includes those topics. So it comes from the start of planning your event, the start of planning your human resources, or whatever you want to call it today, and your people team. People aren't resources, and it's very intentional. So as an individual, let's say a white man, because likely they are the majority at most tech companies, not. What can they do in their step towards allyship? Because we've talked a lot about allyship among different groups that are marginalized, but from the majority group, how can they help?
There are a number of ways that somebody can become a better ally. I would say the first step is educating yourself and educating others, listening to the people around you. One of the things that I like to say at conferences, like in open spaces, is listen as much as you speak. So something I would recommend to someone who feels that they're a part of the majority population is to listen more to the people in the room, and listen especially to the people in the room who may not be speaking as much as everyone else. And that's a good place to start because you'll start to hear and absorb experiences that might make you uncomfortable, but that means that you're learning.
Mm-hmm. Be brave enough to listen. It's not
Sometimes
about
it's hard to
up.
listen. Yeah.
It's not always about speaking up.
I think we feel rushed to just keep speaking, and so it's important to take a moment and listen to the people around you and make an active effort to do that. And then once you've educated yourself and you're listening to these experiences, you can start to take action. Maybe that's giving money to a local organization, maybe that's starting a TMRG program at your organization, or creating a space where those people can come and belong and you can listen to them some more.
A lot of open source companies, I know GitLab is a large open source company, most are very small or not even companies. They may be single maintainer projects. And that leads to this problem where they're only recognizing the technical contributions because that's the easiest to do with Git, with the different repos and all. So how do you help someone that is potentially a single or very tiny maintainership team make sure they're even aware of any diversity issues they have and be a more welcoming community for belonging?
I think smaller teams that are running open source projects are likely to have some system for managing issues. So I would recommend, in order to track non-code contributions, they can move those contributions to issues as well. So if you're planning an event where everyone's coming together to contribute, maybe it's a contributor summit, plan that in the issues where you would also plan your technical work. And that will give you a mechanism for being able to track those contributions.
And it doesn't even have context switching, so people will be very comfortable in it.
People are familiar with the tool already, so instead of going to another tool, use the tools that you're already using, but include documentation issues, include testing, user experience testing, include all of those tasks within the issues that you're already tracking some of the code work, so there's a little bit less of a barrier to also contribute that.
And this also can be valuable as a recruitment tool video, I think. So that makes sense. Yeah.
That wasn't my intention. I'm just having a really great experience working for GitLab. So.
I've heard that from several people. So that's not, from a lot of people that would normally be in marginalized groups in tech, they've had a very positive experience at GitLab, so that's good.
It's really a blessing to work for a company that values you and shows you that they value you through their actions. Like, that is something that a lot of us dream of, and I have it.
Shouldn't be, but that is the reality that it is. That should be the norm, and hopefully we can get there one day.
Hopefully we can get there.
Well, thank you so much. Break a leg, kick ass tomorrow. I'm very excited. I will be up and be there to cheer, and I'm sure a lot of this audience is very excited to both support you and learn from you, so that's very exciting.
I'm hoping that people in the audience who don't think they belong on that stage will see me and see themselves on that stage in the future. That's the goal.
There will be some wet eyes in the audience, I'm sure, but that's a beautiful thing.
That means I've succeeded.
Thank you so much, and thank you, our listeners, and I hope you have the great time the rest of Open Source Summit. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.